Hey everyone, welcome back. Fina here from Fina Reads. Today with more ramblings. And usually I'm checking in on a bi-weekly basis, hence the bi-weekly book ramblings name, but I'm fully aware that this hasn't happened lately. So kind of a, bi-weekly book ramblings with an asterisk. And today I wanted to check in on my vacation read because I'm in between jobs. I took 3 weeks off for just, reading, essentially. And that I did. I actually read 10 books total, with 2 still being in progress, and a total of 4,364 pages, minus the 2 that are in progress. That would be another 400 pages or something on top of that. And while I talked about a couple of those during my June wrap-up already, I wanted to just have one video of what I read while I was sitting at home and doing nothing else. I'm going to talk about them semi in order of when I read them. It's not accurate. I don't remember anymore. It's been 3 weeks of doing nothing. What do you expect from me? I don't even remember what I ate for breakfast. So starting with Mirror Sight by Kristen Britton. I just wanted to say by Green Rider, but that doesn't work quite that well. But it is part of the Green Rider series. It's part of my Green Rider read-along. We had a long live discussion together with Stephanie from Miss Richards Reads and with Sarah from Sarah Fairy Reads about this book and Black Veil, which is book 4 in the series. And it is amazing. It is as good as I remember it. It made me cry like crazy, and there are not a whole lot of books out there that make me cry like crazy. This one does it every single time. There's not much to say without spoiling anything about the series, so just go read that frickin' series if you haven't already. Next up is Richard Bachman's or Stephen King's The Regulators. That was part of the June buddy read with Jake from the Book of Strummer and I. As you know, we're reading one Richard Bachman book a month. I also talked about this one a little bit during the June wrap-up, and I still think this is one of the quirkiest, weirdest books I've ever read in my life. It was a lot of fun. I have to squeeze in Desperation one day. I've heard that it is a bit slower than this one, and I found that kind of slow in the middle especially already, so I'm not sure how quickly I will get to it, knowing how many other good books are out there. But eventually I want to do that because I want to see what kind of a different version of the same story looks like. Plus I really enjoyed the concept of he wrote it 2 different people writing it and publishing it at the same time and being super confused on how they have the same story with the same characters just in different settings. Anyway, if you like quirky stories, there's a bunch of gore in here, so if you're sensitive to that you might not want to pick it up. But if you like quirky stories and want to try a Stephen King or Richard Bachman book, that is definitely a good one to start with. Next up, probably a new favorite romance of mine, is The Charm Offensive by, I still don't know how to pronounce the author's last name, by Alison Cogran. I hope that's how you pronounce her last name, which is a male romance. It's the main character being in a TV show. He is the prince who has to select from 20 different women the one he wants to marry, but instead of one of those women, he falls in love with his producer, who actually just tries to get him married. So it's a really fun story. Both characters are super lovable, and I just had a bunch of fun reading that. And that was one of those in a weekend, basically in a day type of reads. We also talked about it during the Reading Across the Shelf with LGBTQ rep. I highly recommend it if you're looking for a fun, quick romance read. You can't go wrong with this one. The next books I read, 4 total, 2 bigger ones, 2 short stories. I continued with the Last Gift series, and I not only continued, I finished it. So I read Whispers of Stone, which is book 2 in the Last Gift series. I read Solace of Memory, which is a short story that is, when you buy the paperback, the Solace of Memory short story is in the back here. I read The Greatest Adventure, which is the second short story in that series. And then I read These Gossamer Strings, which is book 3 in the series, comes out on July 12th, but Allegra, the author, thankfully sent me an ARC so I could read immediately how it continues. And I now just found out that These Gossamer Strings is 921 pages. And I read this book in 3 days. I never read books that big in 3 days. I rarely even read books that big, period. But it was just so phenomenal. Instead of me gushing about these books for hours and hours and hours, check out the video that is going live on July 12th, because that's an author interview with Allegra. She spent her Saturday morning with me on Teams, which was, by the way, Teams is a whole different story for those type of things, so I apologize upfront for any technical difficulties. All my fault, no one else's. But we talked about her series, about her inspiration. We talked about the AO Collective, which is a super interesting part for that series, and not just that series, but that whole universe that she and the author collaboration that she is working with put together. And it's just so fascinating what they have done, and I'm just in awe with that story in general. So definitely go check that out. Hear from Allegra herself on what the AO Collective is about, what the Last Gift series is about, and what her inspiration was, and how she's collaborating with all of these authors, and see me on the side always smiling and being totally starstruck because it was my very first interview with an author, and it was a lot of fun. We're also sharing a couple of our favorites when it comes to other books with disability representation. So definitely go check out the video on July 12th, and in the comments below the video, put in all of the books that you enjoyed with a disability representation, so that at the end we have a nice long list of books with that topic, with that theme, and if someone is interested, they can look that up. My last book that I read in June was Red, White, Royal Blue, which was also a recommendation during the LGBTQ Reading Across the Shelf session. And this book and I did not vibe. I ended up giving it 2 stars. It was a quick read. I read it over a weekend again. I don't know. I think it wanted to be more, and in order to sell it better, it ended up being a romance. There's a lot of social commentary about the state of the US back then when this book was written, and a lot of rehashing of those themes, and it just didn't, I don't know, it was too fluffy. So if you do something like this, which I don't have a problem with, right? I think it is good to review social issues as in a fictional perspective, to maybe think through like, hey, how could you do certain things? How could you handle certain things? Totally fine with that. I mean, if you listen to the very first Reading Across the Shelf, that's what Philip Chase was talking about on this is what fantasy is really great for in science fiction, to think through like, hey, how could we solve this issue? How could we think through that, etc. So if you do that, then I would appreciate some thinking through, and not just fluffy, super high level rehashing of those things and trying to build a story around it. It just didn't work for me. I know this is a favorite of a lot of people, and I'm fully aware of the fact that I'm in the minority with that opinion. Plus, there was so much unnecessary swearing and being mean to each other in there that just didn't make any sense. Like, if you love someone, why do you have to tell them they're dumb? Or I don't know. I don't know exactly anymore how it was done. I just thought it was stupid. I have no issues with swearing, just to be very clear. In the Last Gift series, lots of swearing, no issues at all. It just didn't fit to this book, to this story. The whole royal thing just didn't sit well with me. Plus, she put in so many cliches about the different countries, like, oh, of course, the one German that isn't here is in lederhosen. It's like, no, I just can't with that stuff anymore. So this is just fluff, not even well done fluff. I mean, a lot of romance is fluff, which again is fine. It's not well done fluff. It's a lot of tropes for the sake of including them, for the sake of making it marketable, and I just don't like this stuff. So too bad. I would have loved a story with those 2 characters that inherently they are not bad. It's just, yeah, okay, I'm stopping now because I'm getting mad at this book right now. Which brings us to July, and I started July off with The Alchemy of Masques and Mirrors by Curtis Craddock, and that was a fun one for several reasons. One is Sarah from Fairy Reads gifted that to me in December, and pretty much at the same time I sent her this book as a gift. So once we received it, we said, oh, we have to buddy read this. But, you know, now it's July and we forgot till Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative brought it up in her Discord, in her what you are currently reading, whatever it's called, channel. She was saying like, why is no one talking about this? And it's like, oh my god, I totally forgot about this book. Thanks for the reminder. So I pinged Sarah and was like, hey, do you want to read this? You know, we kind of said we want to buddy read it, and I just saw it on Leslie's channel, so let's do that, which we kind of did. I got sidetracked a little bit with these Gossamer Strings. I got that arc a lot earlier than I was anticipating, so I moved this back a couple of days, and I started July 1st with this really interesting book, I have to say. Sarah's still currently reading it, and Kate Coy joined us as well, and we're actually buddy reading this now on my Discord. I have a separate channel besides the whole Green Rider read along, so if you want to join it, we are still reading it. And Leslie is over the moon that other people are reading it. She is kind of our cheerleader in this channel. And that was a super fun ride. I did not expect it. So if you like musketeers, swashbuckling, French and Italian and Spanish inspiration in your fantasy stories with airships and steampunk and a really interesting magic system. So I'm really curious to see how that continues. Plus, a really strong female character that also has a disability. There's a lot of geeking out about engineering stuff and physics and chemistry that completely goes above my head. But it's fine. Like, we all said, funny enough, we all said the same thing in our buddy read chat. And we said, like, you know what? It's fine though, because you can continue reading it without fully understanding what is explained there and how the magic works and whatnot. That's what you want, right? Even if you have a complex magic system, even if you don't get it 100%, you can still enjoy the story and still read it and not feel like you're missing something. So really well done in that case. And it's just a lot of fun. And the last book that I finished during my vacation was Richard Bachman's Blaze, or Stephen King Richard Bachman, the last book in Jake's and my Richard Bachman buddy read, and also a book that I haven't read before. It was the last one that was published in 2007, I think, was when this came out. And this is one of those where they say, hey, he forgot it in a trunk, or they found it in a trunk years after his pseudonym death, and they published it. Similar to the Regulators, I didn't think this was a very typical Richard Bachman. It had elements of what you typically see in the first 4 books, at least, of Richard Bachman. This is, again, more like a fluffy entertainment piece. It's not super deep, but it will get to you. Blaze is the main character, actually. He, through an accident, like his father threw him down the stairs a couple of times. He has a mental disability. Yeah, and everybody basically says he's just dumb and he shouldn't do anything by his own because he's dumb and he wouldn't realize what's going on. But Blaze is taken care of by George, and they are planning a pretty big coup to kidnap a baby. Only problem is that George dies a month before they do that, and then Blaze continues with the ghost of George still being around. Sounds kind of weird, but it's actually pretty straightforward. And I thought it was really interesting to read about how he's approaching this kidnapping and to see what then happens with him. But lastly, I want to talk about the 2 books that I'm currently still in the middle of, and that is, surprise, surprise, another Green Rider book. It's Firebrand, which is book 6 in the Green Rider series. That is our July book. And I read about, well, or rather I listened to the audiobook, 200 pages. I will switch to the physical copy eventually because there are scenes that I just want to read and I just can immerse myself better into the story when I read it. And this one I haven't read that often, so this is my 3rd reread, I think, right now. So I definitely want to focus on what's happening, what's going on. But the beginning is always a lot of rehashing of what happened in the past and just setting the scene for this book, blah, blah, blah. So I wasn't too worried about listening to it so far, but I'm excited to really dive in and get into the details. I probably won't finish it out this weekend, and I think I will focus on the other book that I'm in the middle of first, which is Wall of Storms, which has been sitting on my currently reading pile since May, because I've read the first 200 pages or so in May, shortly after Grace of Kings, or early June, I don't know if I don't even know anymore. And then I was kind of like, you know, it's kind of meandering, nothing really happens, and it's like, So I read 100-ish more pages, and it's still slow. So it's still a lot of just, okay, this is what happened next, this is what happened next, this is what happened next. That's just the way the story is told in this book. I still need to make a decision on if I want to continue this series or not. It's interesting enough that I want to know what happens, but just the way the story is told is... I don't know how that makes any sense. I don't know what I should do. One thing that I wish he would do, though, he covers a lot of, like, he introduces a lot of, so kind of like you have different religions in the world, he has philosophers in this world, and they're like 4 or 5 different ones that they're studying and that they are using to basically explain the world or how someone should live, and I keep mixing them up. He explained them, but if you don't remember that, the glossary didn't cover those different philosophy versions that you have. I keep saying all of these rather negative things. Still, the plot has me interested, and I kind of want to know what happens. It just needs to speed up a little bit. All right, that was my vacation or end of vacation rambling. Did you read any interesting book over the 4th of July weekend or just in general over the last weeks? Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day with all of these other amazing booktubers that are out there, that you take the time to watch my video. I really appreciate it. As Kate always said, if you wouldn't watch, I would just talk to myself here. So thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!